We trust spreads because they feel small. A scrape of something on toast, a spoon in oats, a quick sandwich for work. But here's the betrayal. Spreads are one of the easiest ways to accidentally repeat the same sugar, salt, and saturated fat habits every single day without noticing. And it's not just nutrition talk. Australian authorities track real problems too. Food Standards Australia-New Zealand, FSANZ, publishes recall notices when something goes wrong in the supply chain. The Heart Foundation keeps hammering the basics on saturated fat and salt. And the Australian Dietary Guidelines, published through the Australian Government's Eat for Health site, are blunt about limiting discretionary foods, the ones high in added sugars, saturated fat and salt. So today, we're counting down 7 spread brands Australians should avoid as everyday staples. And then we'll finish with 3 cleaner options that make it easier to keep your daily routine simple. Some of these are avoid because a recall happened, and some are avoid because the label makes it way too easy to overdo it. Either way, it's all about what the evidence and the numbers actually say. Starting from the bottom, number 7. Number 7, Coles peanut butter, especially the big value tubs. Peanut butter should be one of the simplest spreads on earth. Peanuts, maybe a little salt, and that's it. When it's that simple, it's a solid everyday option for most people, because you're basically getting nuts in spread form. So why is Coles peanut butter on the avoid list today? Because FSANZ has published a recall alert for Coles peanut butter in 2025. And whenever a spread hits the recall list, that's a practical signal to be more cautious with that product line until the issue is resolved. This isn't about panic. It's about how food safety actually works in real life. Recalls happen when something has gone wrong, and the official advice is usually to stop using it and return it. Here's the bigger lesson. If you buy house brand spreads in bulk, you're more likely to keep the same tub in the cupboard for weeks and keep eating it automatically. That's exactly why recalls matter more for spreads than, say, a one-off snack you buy once. Pro tip, straight from the way FSANZ runs recalls. Make it a habit to check recall alerts once a week, or at least if you hear about a recall in the news. Spreads live in the pantry and fridge for a long time, so they're the kind of product that can still be sitting in your house when a recall notice comes out. If you already have a tub at home, don't guess. Check the label details against the recall notice and follow the refund advice. Moving up to number 6, and this one shows why it's just a dip is not a safe mindset. Number 6, Paradise Beach Purveyor's Smoked Trout and Chive Dip, 150 grams. This is the kind of product people treat as harmless. A fancy dip, a weekend platter, something you spread on crackers or bread and don't think twice about. But in 2024, a FSANZ food recall notice was issued for Paradise Beach Purveyor's Smoked Trout and Chive Dip, 150 grams. Because of microbial contamination with Listeria monocytogenes. The recall notice specifically highlights the higher risk groups: pregnant women, unborn babies, neonates, the elderly, and immunocompromised people. But it also makes it clear the general population can become ill from contaminated food. Why does that matter for this list? Because spreads and dips are often ready to eat. You're not cooking them. You're not heating them. If something is contaminated, it goes straight from container to mouth. And dips often get handled more than other foods. Double dipping, sitting out, being put back in the fridge. If you love smoked fish dips, the cleaner move isn't to swear them off forever. It's to treat them like higher risk foods. Keep them cold, don't leave them out, don't eat them past the use by, and if a recall happens, don't bargain with yourself. You return it. This is also a good reminder that the avoid list is not always about this brand is evil. Sometimes it's about a documented safety event. FSANZ doesn't publish recall notices for entertainment. It's an official signal that something went wrong. Now we're getting into the everyday spreads that quietly wreck your nutrition without feeling like junk food. Number 5, Nutella hazelnut spread. Nutella has a nostalgia factor. It tastes like childhood. And because it's a spread, people often treat it as different from dessert. But independent coverage in 2024 called out the sugar content very clearly. In a May 2024 comparison of chocolate hazelnut spreads, Nutella is listed at around 56 grams of sugar per 100 grams. That number matters because it tells you what the jar actually is, nutritionally. It's a sweet spread, closer to a dessert topping than a daily breakfast food. Now connect that to the Australian Dietary Guidelines, which repeatedly advise limiting discretionary foods, especially those high in added sugars and saturated fat. That doesn't mean you can't ever have it. It means if it's becoming your default morning routine, it's worth calling it what it is. Here's the trap: portion creep. Most people don't measure a serve. They smear until it looks right. On toast, that can easily become a heavy layer. On pancakes, it can become a generous spoon. On a sandwich, it can become 2 thick sides. If you want a simple rule that doesn't feel like dieting, use Nutella like you'd use dessert sauce. Treat it as a sometimes food, not a breakfast base. If you're having it, keep it thin, and pair it with something that has protein and fibre, so it's not just sugar on bread. And if you're thinking, but it's just a little, remember this video's theme. A little, repeated daily, becomes your baseline. Number 4, Lotus Biscoff spread. This is the one that sneaks into a lot of Australian households because it feels fun, trendy, and somehow lighter than chocolate spread. But let's be honest about what it is. Biscoff spread is basically biscuit in jar form. And biscuit spreads are typically built from sugar and oils to create that smooth, spoonable texture that feels dangerously snackable. This is exactly where the Australian Dietary Guidelines concept of discretionary foods becomes useful. Discretionary foods aren't poison. They're foods that are not necessary for nutrients, and they tend to be high in added sugars, saturated fat, and kilojoules. A biscuit spread fits that pattern perfectly, even if it's sold in a cute jar and feels like a treat spread. The consumer reality check is simple. People don't stop at one spoon. They eat it from the jar. They add it to toast, crepes, oats, smoothies. It spreads literally across your whole diet. If you love the flavour, keep it as a planned treat, not a pantry staple. Or make it a special occasion spread, like a birthday breakfast. The moment it becomes a weekday habit, it stops being fun and starts being a quiet, daily sugar and oil delivery system. Now we get to a brand that lots of people consider normal and harmless, but the nutrition profile matters if you use it constantly. Number 3, Philadelphia Original Cream Cheese. Cream cheese is one of those spreads that people treat as neutral. Not sweet, not salty like Vegemite, just creamy. But the health guidance is pretty consistent here. The Heart Foundation's advice on healthy eating and fats pushes people to limit saturated fat and to choose healthier, unsaturated fats more often. Cream cheese is a dairy, fat-heavy spread, and when it becomes your everyday base, it can quietly lift saturated fat intake without you noticing. This doesn't mean cream cheese is bad. It means the role matters. If it's occasional, fine. If it's daily, thick, and paired with other saturated fat foods like bacon, sausage, pastries, buttery croissants, then you're stacking the same risk factor again and again. Here's a smarter way to think about it. Use cream cheese as a flavour accent, not the foundation. Or swap more often to spreads that give you protein with less saturated fat, like cottage cheese, ricotta, or a thick strained yogurt-style spread, depending on what you tolerate. Also, watch the flavoured versions. A lot of flavoured cream cheese products add extra salt and ingredients that make it easier to overeat. The more snacky it becomes, the more it stops being a simple dairy food and turns into a processed spread. Quick pause. If you're finding this research valuable and you're still with me, drop a comment with the number 3 so we know you made it this far. And if this is your first time watching, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. It really helps us keep making well-researched, fact-checked consumer guides. Alright, back to it. Number 2, Vegemite. Yes, Vegemite is Australian. Yes, people love it. And yes, it's on this list anyway. Why? Because the main issue with Vegemite is not that it's unsafe. It's that it's extremely easy to turn it into a daily salt habit without realising, especially if you spread it thick. Heart Foundation guidance on healthy eating includes clear advice around limiting salt, and it's one of the most important invisible risks in everyday diets, because it's easy to go over without feeling it. Yeast spreads like Vegemite are concentrated in flavour, and concentrated flavour usually means concentrated sodium. If you already have high sodium foods across your day, like instant noodles, deli meats, takeaway, salty sauces, chips, then thick Vegemite on toast is not just a little. It's adding to a daily pattern. So why call it avoid? Because the title is about daily staples. If you're someone with high blood pressure, risk, family history, or you're already eating a lot of packaged food, Vegemite as a thick daily spread is not doing you a favour. If you love it, the practical compromise is simple. Use a thin scrape. Treat it like seasoning, not a paste. Pair it with lower salt foods the rest of the day. And don't give it the health halo some people give it just because it's iconic. Now the number 1 spot, and it's the one that surprises people because peanut butter feels like a health food. Number 1, Kraft peanut butter. Peanut butter can be a great spread. It's nuts, it has protein, it's filling. But the brand matters because some mainstream peanut butters are built to be perfectly smooth and shelf stable, and that usually involves extra ingredients beyond peanuts. Kraft is a classic supermarket brand, and in Australia it sits in the same wider grocery world as other household spread brands after the Bega and Mondelez deal that reshaped those pantry staples in the late 2010s. The point here isn't corporate drama. The point is that big mainstream spreads are designed for mass appeal, and mass appeal usually means sweeter, smoother, more stable, and easier to eat more of. So what should you do with Kraft peanut butter? If you're buying it as your everyday healthy spread, don't assume. Check the ingredient list and the nutrition panel. Compare it to a pure peanut butter, where the ingredients are basically peanuts, maybe salt. If the jar you're holding has added sugars, added oils, or a longer ingredient list, that's not automatically a disaster, but it is a different product. It's not the same as pure peanut butter. Now connect that back to the Australian Dietary Guidelines idea again. When you keep discretionary style additions, added sugars and extra fats, in your daily foods, your daily baseline shifts. You can eat normal amounts and still end up with too much sugar and saturated fat overall. This is why Kraft gets the number 1 avoid spot. Not because peanut butter is bad, because people buy Kraft thinking they're buying a simple nut spread, and then they use it daily in big portions. If you're going to make peanut butter a daily habit, it's worth choosing one that's actually simple. Now, let's flip it. We've covered what to avoid as everyday staples based on FSANZ recall notices, and on what Australian health guidance says about sugar, salt, and saturated fat patterns. So what are 3 cleaner options that make the routine easier? First cleaner option, Maver's Pure Peanut Butter. This is the kind of spread that matches what people think they're buying when they buy peanut butter. Simple, nut-based, filling, and easy to control. The reason this one earns a spot is not hype. It's the less is more principle. When your ingredient list is basically peanuts, you're getting the core food without the extras. And it aligns better with the Heart Foundation's general direction around choosing healthier fats more often. Because nuts are a better base than sugary spreads or highly saturated fat spreads for everyday use. How to use it so it actually helps you. Spread it with something that adds fibre and volume, like whole grain toast, sliced banana, or apple. And if you need sweetness, add it yourself with fruit instead of buying it pre-sweetened. Second cleaner option, Pix peanut butter. Pix is another strong example of what cleaner should mean in the real world. Not perfect, not magical, just simple. The biggest win here is control. A simple peanut butter makes portion control easier because you can taste the peanut and stop, instead of chasing sweetness. It's also a good swap if you're trying to move away from dessert-style spreads, but you still want something satisfying. If you're the kind of person who snacks at night, a spoon of simple peanut butter on toast tends to be far less of a sugar hit than chocolate spreads or biscuit spreads, and that matters for habits. The Australian Dietary Guidelines focus on overall dietary patterns, and swapping a daily discretionary spread for a core food style spread is a pattern change you actually feel. Third cleaner option, St. Dalfour fruit spread. If you want a sweet spread that feels like jam, this is a cleaner direction than chocolate and biscuit spreads, and usually a cleaner direction than the cheapest jams that are basically sugar gels with flavour. Here's why it earns a spot. Fruit spreads like this tend to be simpler, and they keep you closer to a fruit-based sweet rather than a sugar and oil dessert spread. It still counts as sugar, so we're not pretending it's a health food, but it's an easier sweet option to keep occasional without spiralling into spooning half a jar. The smarter way to use a fruit spread is to treat it like a small flavour layer, not the main event. Thin spread, then add whole food volume like yogurt, oats, or fresh fruit. That's how you keep the sweetness without building your breakfast around added sugar. Before we close, here's a quick checklist you can use on any spread in the supermarket without needing a nutrition degree. First, check the ingredient list. If sugar is one of the first ingredients in a spread you plan to eat every day, treat it as a treat spread, not a staple. Second, check saturated fat. The Heart Foundation is consistent on this. Higher saturated fat foods should be less frequent, and you should lean more towards healthier, unsaturated fats where you can. Third, check salt. If you're using salty spreads, remember you're stacking salt across the day. If your diet already includes lots of packaged and takeaway foods, salty spreads are not neutral. Fourth, watch the healthy marketing language. The Australian Dietary Guidelines don't care what the front of the jar says. They care about the overall pattern and the numbers on the back. So there you have it, 7 spread brands Australians should avoid as everyday staples, based on FSANZ recall notices and Australian health guidance around sugar, salt, and saturated fat patterns, and 3 cleaner options that make it easier to build a better routine. Look, companies count on us not checking labels and not checking recall notices. But now you know what FSANZ publishes when something goes wrong. And you know what the health authorities keep repeating about the everyday stuff, not the once-a-year treats. You can make choices based on evidence, not vibes. Have you tried any of these spreads? Which one surprised you most? And what other product category should we fact-check next? If this helped, hit like so YouTube shows it to more Australians who'll actually use it. Subscribe for more evidence-based shopping guides and drop your suggestions in the comments. Stay informed, shop smart, and trust the evidence.